Hi, this is Betty with Beyond the Dollar. This morning I'm sitting here out on my back deck, looking out on the lake and appreciating the, just the beauty of nature and all that, and pondering on the fact that I haven't been able to get any work done all week. And there's times when the Lord just does that in my life where he'll put a pause on everything I'm doing, and it's like, here, just come and sit with me for a little bit. And so since the beginning of October, I have been um, just enjoying the privilege that I have right now with my family, to spend time with them. Um, we're doing a video conference with family, not conference, but you know what I mean. We're doing a video thing thingy, where we're doing communion together every morning for 30 days. My sister initiated that, and she's like, we'll take like 15, 20 minutes. We'll just do communion together, um, and yeah, it's turned into a whole thing. So, anyone can jump on the call, and we're just hanging out together. And what we have found is like the 15 minutes turns into 2.5 hours of us just hanging out and spending time together and ministering to each other during this time. And, I'm in Chicago, in the Chicago area, but I'm a little over an hour out of the city. I live north in the northern suburbs. My sister lives in the inner city. I have a niece who lives in the inner city, and a nephew that live there in the city. I don't get to see them really often because of life and that. We talk all the time. Um, and then I have a niece that lives in Virginia. She's way out on the coast, on the East Coast, and so I don't get to see her very often. I have a brother who lives in Tennessee, and it's I love it that our family didn't used to do this kind of thing. Okay, so I've just been appreciating what God is doing right now in bringing our family together, and um, so my mornings have been taken up with family every day since the beginning of October, and I have a granddaughter, and I live with my son and daughter-in-law, and she's going on 4 months old, and and Mama has gone back to work. My son works from home, and so Grandma's very much needed right now. So I will often get interrupted to take care of my granddaughter, which I welcome the interruption. Um, at the same time, I haven't gotten a thing done in the last 2 weeks. However, when it's at the Lord's hand, I had to let go of the frustration of not getting the work I wanted to do accomplished, and just go with God. What are you calling me to do today? Now I have the freedom of being retired, so I am able to do that to a point that maybe a lot of other people aren't able to do. Um, but at the same time, like I said, I've been sitting here pondering on this past week in particular, because we're nearing the end of the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot. Um, Sometimes it's called the Feast of Booths, and I learned a few things this week that I thought I would like to share with you guys. And one is, I don't know whether you know this or not, but on the Hebrew calendar, there really are two celebrations of the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot. There's two celebrations every year. And this might throw a few people, and I'll be honest with you, it took me a little bit to not to wrap my brain around it, But to go, oh my gosh, you're right. Um, the Feast of Hanukkah, let me rephrase that. The Festival of Hanukkah, which is the Feast of Dedication, um, you won't find it in the Old Testament because it comes out of um, that intertestament period um, in relation to the you can read about it in First and Second Maccabees, and um, so it's available online. If you look up the story behind Hanukkah, you can read all about it. Um, but when it was all over, okay, basically in a nutshell, what happens is um, Antiochus Epiphanes the Fourth comes in to Judah, attacking and desecrates the temple. I slaughtered a pig, okay, not kosher, definitely defiled the temple, but it went further than that. Everything was destroyed. I mean, it was just everything within the temple was just, it was ransacked. It was just devastated, and it was important to the people of Israel. It was important to them to restore. Once the warfare had ended, the story behind Hanukkah is that they went in and they were restoring the temple and rededicating the temple, and it was during that time, as the story goes, that there was um, oil for only they found the consecrated oil, but only enough to burn for one day. And as tradition dictates, that the oil burned for 8 days while they were preparing the new consecrated oil. Now that they can't prove that. But here's what I found interesting. Now I've read the story in Maccabees a number of times. I know that this is what they did, and off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact reference. Um, but I want to say it's in Second Maccabees, where they had declared, they said, well, we're going to celebrate the Feast of Booths because we weren't able to celebrate it before now because we were living in caves, and they had been living in caves because of the attack against them. So it struck me, their reasoning behind why they wanted to celebrate the Feast of Booths, because it was out of season. It was in the month of Kislev, which is later in the year. Okay, um, Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot, is celebrated beginning on the 15th day of Tishri, which is it's now. It usually lands somewhere between September and mid-October, and again, it just really struck me that they wanted to celebrate the Feast of Booths. It would have been. I mean, my mind goes to a bunch of other places. Okay, one, my thought was, well, why didn't they celebrate the Passover? Because there's other references in Scripture where they celebrated the Passover at times when it was not the time to celebrate Passover. But this reference really struck me because Hanukkah is an 8-day feast. Sukkot is technically it's an 8-day feast. You have the 7 days. The seventh day is the great day of the feast, and then you have a special Sabbath the following day, which is referred to as Shemini Atzeret, which is just simply the 8th day. And what really strikes me with all of this is how we get a double portion of the feast of Sukkot every year. We have the opportunity to observe this and go, you know, the Maccabees, they're like, we're going to celebrate this, even though it's out of season. But we're recognizing that we've been in a temporary dwelling place. We've been in a place where we've had to live in a way that was not necessarily what God intended, but it was this temporary holding place while we got through. And that's what Sukkot is. Sukkot is a reminder that the children of Israel lived in tents for their 40 years in the wilderness. And to me, in many ways, the celebration of Sukkot is a reminder that we've come out of the wilderness. And this year I've just been kind of sitting with this, like I said, with the Lord, just kind of all week and going, Lord, what did you say? There's something in this. Like I could feel the Holy Spirit just hovering over this all week. And it finally came to this point this morning as I've been again just pondering. And I felt like the Lord just really spoke to me this morning and said, this year there is a group of people who have been in a temporary holding place. They've been in a place where they've had to live very restrictedly for a number of years. This isn't a little thing, but they've been under major attack. There's a lot that they've lost. Even their faith has been attacked, just like the Maccabees, just like Judah during the time of the Maccabees. There's been a lot that has come against them, and they have triumphed. They've gotten through. They are overcomers. And they're coming out of that season. They're coming out of a wilderness season. And now they can celebrate in a way they weren't able to celebrate in the prior season. They didn't have access to certain things in the prior season, but they're going to have access to those things in this new season. They're going to be able to celebrate in a way that they weren't able to celebrate because of the attacks, because of the oppression, because of the things that they had been dealing with in the prior season. They just simply weren't able, for one reason or another, they weren't able to celebrate. But now they're coming into a time of celebration, and they're going to celebrate in ways they never thought possible. But here's the thing about Sukkot. Back in the day, back in the time of the Second Temple era, there were these incredible celebrations that was going on in and around the temple area. So during the daytime, there was this. It was called the water libation. There was a water pouring ceremony that happened, and the priests would make the trek from the temple. They would come out with their silver pitchers, and they would go down to the pool of Siloam, and they would get the water, and they would walk the trek back up. They would come through what's known as the water gate, and they would enter into the temple courtyard. And there in front of the temple, they would do this water pouring ceremony. And that's the area where when the Lord Jesus stands up on the great day of the feast and says, all who are thirsty, come to me and I will satisfy you. I think I'm saying that right. I don't remember. I'm sorry. It's early morning, and I'm only partway through my first coffee. But I think you know the reference. It's in the book of John. Anyway, it's and it's an incredible thing because the Feast of Tabernacles was one of those times where Israel was commanded by the Lord during the time of Moses. They were commanded of the Lord to come up to Jerusalem 3 times a year. So this during Feast of Tabernacles was the third um, journey they would have to make. These were the pilgrimage journeys that they would make, and this one was you're there for a whole week. I mean, it was amazing, and it was an incredible time of celebration, and it's known as the Feast of Joy. Um, and you're commanded to be joyful during this time, and at night there were these incredible fire um, demonstrations. It was during the daytime you had this water pouring, and at night there were um, there were 4 pillars that stood in the courtyard, and the ladders that went up to these pillars were 75 feet long. Okay, and there were apprentice priests. So the young guys, they would have climb up these ladders with their oil jugs, and they would pour oil into these oil bowls, the lamps that were on top of these pillars, and then they'd light them. And the light was so bright that came from these pillars that it says that the light shone into like every courtyard in Jerusalem. It just was the whole of Jerusalem was lit up, and the courtyard of the temple was like the brightness of the noonday. And then you had the priests. There was the Levitical choir would come in, and they would stand on the steps of the sanctuary, and singing psalms and hymns and songs to the Lord, and everything was joyous. And and then they had priests that would come in with torches. And I remember reading, and I forget exactly where I read this from, but um, but there were some of these priests that they would come in with these lit torches, and they would parade into the courtyard, and it was just a time of incredible celebration, just off the charts celebration every single day. And of course, then the great day of the feast, the seventh day, it just went through the roof. But I remember reading somewhere that there was some record that said that these priests, there were some that carrying these torches would actually juggle them. And I don't know if you've ever been to the circus, but as a kid, I went to the circus with my grandfather, and I remember seeing the jugglers. And then there were those that were, the fire jugglers, and they would stand across from each other, and they would throw these their torches back and forth. And that was the imagery that was described in this one article I read about what that scenery was like, what that it just such evoked such a time of joy and celebration, and um and just artistry and motion, and I thought it was just so amazing to me that, I don't know that we think about the somberness and the holiness of God, and all of that, and I won't let go of the holiness of God. But at the same time, there's the joy of the Lord, and there's this, like Jesus said, I came that you might have life, and that more abundantly. Just the abundance of joy that comes with this celebration just has me so struck at the heart. And then to have these two celebrations, we only see Hanukkah in the New Testament, and again, it's in relation to Jesus went up to the temple at the time of the Feast of Dedication. And it's amazing to me um, that we have the richness of this heritage, the richness of what God was conveying through the feasts. But again, as I've been sitting here and just pondering with God, what are you saying to us this year? What are you saying to your people? What's the word that you have for us now? And it just keeps resonating within me that we're entering into a season of delight and joy. And for those who are coming out of that, we'll call it that wilderness season, they're coming out of a time when they've had to live restrictedly in a way that maybe they've been in it now for so long. It's like this is just the way we live. And you could never imagine life changing and entering into the blessing, and then suddenly, all of a sudden, it's there. All of a sudden, everything is changed. All of a sudden, now things are different. And I don't like to make those kind of claims unless I know. I have to know that I know this is what God is saying. But I truly believe that there is such blessing coming from the Lord. I want to read something that I believe is really a word from the Lord, and I'm reading from Amos 9, and this is from the Message Bible. Yes, indeed, it won't be long now. God's decree. Things are going to happen so fast your head will swim. One thing fast on the heels of the other. You won't be able to keep up. Everything will be happening at once and everywhere you look. Blessings. Blessings like wine pouring off the mountains and hills. I'll make everything right again for my people Israel. Again, it's Amos 9. I want to say like 13 to 15. I'm going to end with that today. I truly believe that the Lord is saying blessings, blessings, blessings. So I want to leave you with a blessing this morning. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. This has been Betty with Beyond the Dollar. Shalom.